There are people out there that like to get their thrills bungee jumping or maybe skydiving, or some people might just watch the latest episode of The Bachelor. But if you really want to get your heart rate up, if you really want your blood pumping, then you should definitely try purposely dropping an action figure accessory onto your carpet. But honestly, that's really not for the faint of heart. You essentially have to have nerves of steel. But anywho, if you guys are all about excitement, then you guys are definitely going to be all fired up for today's list, because we have another top 5 most expensive list coming at you guys. The last couple of top 5 most expensive lists that I've put together were definitely a lot of fun. As I always say, you kind of get to go back and look at figures that maybe you just forgot about, kind of got lost in history, but they have quietly but surely accumulated value over the years. And it's especially fun because the last 2 characters that I've done are probably 2 of my favorite from the comic book universe. And it's crazy to think that today's comic book character is less than 15 years old. He debuted in 2011. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Fallout number 4. This was shortly after the death of the Spider-Man for that universe, which was he would eventually cross over to the main Marvel continuity, which is basically Earth 616. The Ultimate Universe would eventually meet its demise with only a few characters making it onto Earth 616. So it's a very interesting comic book lore. I'm not really going to get too deep into it because today we're only here to talk about action figures. But if you guys are very interested in knowing a little bit more about Miles Morales' backstory, I definitely suggest you guys pick up some of his issues or some of his comic book history, because it's very, very intriguing for sure. And in all honesty, I was very disappointed with the new animated universe that they created for Miles, just because it's not based in the comic books. His original origin story is definitely darker, especially once they introduced the Spider-Verse. But as I said, that's a video for a completely different day, because we're just here to talk about those wonderful action figures that we call Marvel Legends. Today we're going to be looking at the top 5 most expensive Miles Morales Marvel Legends. And if you guys enjoy this type of content, don't forget to check out our top 5 most expensive Marvel Legends playlist, where we upload every single one of these videos, and each particular video is going to have its own character attached to it. So as I said, if you guys enjoyed this particular video, go ahead and check out that playlist. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into it, and let's start off with number 5, where we have the Miles Morales from the Cross the Spider-Verse animated film. Unfortunately, this figure did not come with a Build-A-Figure piece. However, it is a part of a pretty coveted wave because it is retro carded, and it does have some pretty unique designs. Not to mention, every single action figure in this particular wave has a brand new unique body mold, which is something that Hasbro does not usually do. Even when they introduce a brand new body mold, you know they're going to reuse the heck out of it. So it was really interesting for them to give us brand new body molds all around. Now, the wave as a whole was kind of hit or miss. Not everybody was into some of the figures. However, the wave did feature Miles Morales. It also had Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man 2099, and then Gwen, obviously. Originally, you could pick this figure up for about $24.99, depending on where you were picking it up from. Some stores had it a little bit higher, but the retail was about like $25 to $27. However, if you are looking to pick it up now, because it's sold out in most of like the big retailers, you will be paying somewhere along the lines of like mid 40s. In my personal humble opinion, this is the perfect opportunity to pick the figure up, because once part 2 starts to gain traction, or once we see a teaser or a trailer, I think this figure has a potential to really spike. It is in that beautiful retro card as well, so it's very important to get it in really good condition. So just be wary of any low rated sellers on eBay or Amazon. At the 4th spot, we have Miles Morales from the Gamerverse, and he was actually a part of that Armadillo Build-A-Figure wave. This was an action figure that for the longest time was also pretty difficult to find. I think there was a restock maybe like a few months after its release, but it was kind of towards the end of the pandemic era, so the big retailers were still reeling from the effects of the pandemic and being shut down for so long. But they eventually revamped, and this was one of those first few waves. It did drop a little bit because there is a newer version to this particular figure, but you had a lot of that newer modern technology. The aesthetic is really good. There's a lot of texturing to this particular figure, and it came with quite a few accessories along with a Build-A-Figure piece, which is something that you don't really see too much of. There was a GameStop exclusive one, which was basically the exact same figure without the Build-A-Figure piece, but it had translucent plastic, and all of the accessories were in that translucent blue plastic, which is a really interesting design. I love the figure. It was supposed to be like Miles Morales in his invisible form, or using his invisible powers. For the most part, that figure really didn't gain a lot of traction. I think eventually it settled around like really high 30s to very low 40s. However, this particular figure has stayed pretty strong, pretty consistent. There were times when this figure had gone up to like, high 60s, but it's settled around somewhat similar to what the Across the Spider-Verse Miles is at. So it's roughly around like $40 to $45. Some of them might be a little bit more expensive. Just keep an eye on this figure, because Armadillo is a villain that some people have maybe spec'd on as having some live action potential. So we could potentially see this figure going up in value. But in my personal opinion, this is probably maybe one of the best Miles Morales action figures out there. Even though it is based on the video game, I don't necessarily feel like you have had to play the video game to fully be able to appreciate just how fantastic this figure is. So that is our fourth spot. Let's move on to the third spot on today's list, where we have another movie version of Miles Morales. We're talking about Miles Morales from Into the Spider-Verse. This was actually a part of that Stiltman Build-A-Figure wave, and it also included Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy for this wave. And I know I briefly mentioned this earlier in the video, but I have to give just a ton of recognition to Hasbro, because a lot of these Across or Into the Spider-Verse action figures that they released, all of them seem to have very unique body molds, not to mention every single one of them had aesthetics that were very similar to the animated series, which again is not something that Hasbro usually does. They could have easily just reused body molds that they had lying around from previous waves or previous figures, but they chose to do something brand new, and like I said, I have to really give them credit for that. This is definitely not the most heavily articulated Miles figure out there. It's very, very limited because of the jacket, and some of the joints are understandably thin, so it's a figure that you have to be very careful with. But as I said, it's a phenomenal figure. You can definitely tell that a lot of effort was put into this, and it's definitely gone up in price. I think if you're looking for one in really good condition unopened, you're looking to pay somewhere along the lines of like $75 to $80. I did see some for as high as $90. And even though the figure is extremely expensive, I can definitely understand why it is on today's list. It is one of the best Miles Morales action figures that Hasbro has ever done. Let's move on to the second spot on today's list, and we have the Marvel Legends Miles Morales from the Space Venom Build-A-Figure wave. This one is closer to his depictions in the comic books. It comes with a decent array of extra hands as well as an unmasked head sculpt. Now this figure has seen somewhat of a dip in the last few months, primarily because they decided to re-release the Space Venom in a 2-pack, which I believe was like a Target exclusive or something along those lines. And even though this is one of the best Miles Morales action figures, it definitely dropped the overall value because some people just chose the route of picking up the 2-pack instead of having to hunt down every single figure in this wave. And that makes a lot of sense, considering a lot of the figures from this wave have just gone up to astronomically high prices. So as I said, it has seen a little bit of a low in the last few months, but it's still a figure that brand new in packaging, you will have to pay close to about $80 or high 70s. Even those that are opened and have been played around and are not necessarily in great condition, even those warrant about $40. And some of these don't even have the extra hands or the extra accessories. So it's definitely a figure that is still a very expensive figure, even though, like I said, it has continued to lose value, I think, the further away we get from the Space Venom re-release figure. But regardless, because of its price point, it is still number 2 on today's list. Definitely a hefty price for this figure. Let's move on to the top spot on today's list, where we have the Miles Morales from the Venom Pool Build-A-Figure wave. This one really caught me off guard. I don't necessarily feel like that many people are interested in the Miles Morales. until I see the prices, even for the used ones, which are going anywhere from like, high 30s to like low 40s, just depends on the condition. I'm talking about without the build-to-figure piece, just the figure itself. So I think it's a combination of both things. Everybody is really intrigued with this like carnageized version of Miles Morales, but they're also very intrigued by the Venompool figure, which, like I said, a little bit baffling for me because Venompool doesn't really have that big of a reach in terms of the collector community, and it's only a matter of time before they decide to release it in some sort of deluxe packaging, as a single release. So we'll see if that potentially drops the price. But as of this moment, this is the most expensive Miles Morales Marvel Legends action figure out there. If you're looking for one that's like in really good condition and packaging, you could be paying anywhere from like 90 to low 100s depending on the seller. But that's an insane price point for a character that, like I said, if you're familiar with the character, if you're familiar with the storyline, you'll be intrigued, but there's a lot of people that didn't really pay attention to it. So very intriguing character, definitely one of the most unique Miles Morales out there, and it very easily takes the top spot. So there you guys have it. There is our top 5 most expensive Miles Morales action figures. I absolutely love this list. Like I said, the last couple of lists I've had an absolute blast putting together. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you own any of these action figures? Do you plan on picking any of these up in the near future? If you're an absolute baller, of course. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. If you guys enjoy this type of content, you guys can always hit the like button, subscribe. Like I said earlier, check out the playlist. We have a bunch of top 5 most expensive Marvel Legends on there. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one.